Wednesday, October 10th, 2018, Monaco 64, home of alternative economics and contrarian views. This morning I want to talk about inflation and the definition of inflation. I've spoken about that before and how by manipulating definition of words, the powers that be can control the general public into believing things that are not really factual. And I'll look at how inflation was defined back in the 1970s, early 80s. This is the Merriam-Webster dictionary pocketbook. It was my dad's. It's still, still here. We haven't got the back cover, but it's still legible. And before I go into the markets to see what is happening this morning, again, I'd like to thank all the new subscribers, all the existing subscribers to making this channel possible. When I started out, of course, I had 0 subscribers. I never thought I'd be up here almost to 21,000. And I'd also like to thank all those who have contributed to the channel. There are several different ways to contribute, and you can find it in the description through donations, through the Monaco 64 Teespring store. Recently, I've added goldinvestments.co.uk promo code for those who are looking to buy gold or silver, especially in the UK. Am I pushing people to buy gold and silver? No. Of course, I buy gold and silver. I'm a proponent of sound money, and if people are interested, they have asked me in the past, and I have given them the information, where to buy it. And right now, yeah, this is a way to tell them where to buy it and get a discount. So, it's a win-win. I am trying to work with other bullion dealers in the UK to get a promo code as well. I'm not only gonna, endorse one. There's another one called Atkinson's Bullion, which I dealt with and recommend as well. I haven't been able to set up a deal with them yet, but feel free to go there if you get a better price. So it's 8:25 a.m. We'll look at the markets before going back to inflation and the definition and how they've corrupted that in order to fool people to think that we have no inflation. And of course, we have inflation. The cost of living has been rising and rising for the general public, the top 1% and the Wall Street, the people involved in finance, politicians. They don't complain about it because they give themselves, huge pay rises. They're benefiting from the inflation that's been kept in the financial system, and also housing is benefiting. So let's look at what we're doing this morning. Spot gold is 11.89, so it's down only half a dollar, sorry. The range has been 11.8850 to 11.9150, the spot price overnight. It's fairly quiet. Silver 14.39, up a cent and a half. Range has been 14.35 to 14.44. So yeah, precious metals still being contained, this narrow range at the moment. Excuse me. Stock markets yesterday, again, not an update for the markets, even though it wasn't a collapse or anything too big. The Dow was down only 56, S&P down 4, NASDAQ was up slightly. This morning, the Dow right now, Dow futures up 4 points, S&P futures unchanged, and so is the NASDAQ future unchanged. Looking at the charts, it seems to me that the S&P is just hovering above the January high, all-time high, but it looks like it's trying to fall back below that level. The Dow, of course, is kind of, I've spoke about the false breakout that we had, 21st of September. but you know, then again, we've had another false breakout, like on the 3rd of October, we made another all-time high. But now we've come back down again. It doesn't seem to have too much traction and, you know, continuing. There's no momentum here, and we're below the all-time high from January at the moment. So that's the stock markets. The currencies. While the pound is a little firmer, has been a little firmer the last few days, is at 130, 168 right now, up 0.2%. Euro 114.90 unchanged. Dollar yen also pretty much stable here at the moment, 113.08, up 0.1%. Dollar yuan 6.92, that's also virtually unchanged. Many of you have been talking about how dollar yuan has been pegged to the price of gold and dollars. That might be so a little bit, but I wouldn't put too much into that. Maybe there is a little bit of that, but you know, with the pound, the same thing happens. With the euro, the same thing happens. But maybe the Chinese are trying to keep their currency pegged to gold. Maybe that might be so. Who knows? But I don't think it's something that I'm like losing sleep over, to be honest. Crude oil still fairly strong, 74.62 WTI. It is down a little bit overnight, down 1/3%, but still fairly elevated. Brent crude 84.60, down 1/4%. What about the bond markets? Well, yesterday the 10-year yield did make a new high, up to 326, the 10-year yield. And then it dropped towards the end of the day. I think we closed around 320. It's now 321. Markets don't go in the same direction forever. They do correct. Yields don't go up in a straight line. So it's still in a breakout mode, so not positive. Italian market. Yeah, Italian market yesterday was not doing well early in the day. We got to 371, the yield. And then we closed towards the end of the day. It corrected down. The bond markets rallied in Italy. And we were at 348. But this morning is back up to 358. You have to think that the Italian officials could be intervening in this market. Even the Italian Treasury, which sounds perverse that they're buying their own bonds to keep them looking good, but they could be, but they won't be able to do it forever. That's the thing about markets. I know a lot of you don't believe there are real markets anymore, but eventually they do. How can I say? Impose their will. Governments are very small. The markets are much bigger. Unless, of course, you know, governments close everything down, or there's a war and the markets are closed and governments impose all kinds of domestic sanctions. But for now, I don't think that's going to happen. So inflation. So of course, we know that the data that are published on inflation, like CPI or PCE or RPI in the UK, are all bogus. You only have to go to shadowstats.com to see that they've been revising the data since the mid-90s. And John Williams from ShadowStats even said that they started doing that when NAFTA came about in the mid-90s, just to keep the public blind to the fact that we do have inflation. So according to the merriam-webster dictionary pocketbook from the 1970s, this is the definition of inflation here. And I read, an abnormal increase in the volume of money and credit resulting in a substantial and continued rise in the general price level. So that's right. It's an abnormal increase in the volume or supply of money and credit. And isn't that what we've had forever? especially after '08. Yes. So what's the definition now? Even Investopedia has been corrupted. So this is what they give as a definition. And I read from Investopedia. And I do use Investopedia for a few things, but this is, how the general public and young people through their education, and I bet you that's what they teach in universities as well now. It says inflation is the rate at which the general level of prices of goods and services is rising. Consequently, the purchasing power of currency is falling. Central banks attempt to limit inflation and avoid deflation in order to keep the economy running smoothly. What a load of rubbish. Central banks are the ones who make the inflation possible. They're the ones who create it along with the governments and the commercial banks. So this is totally bogus. This is a fake definition of inflation. How has it changed? Well, they're saying that the measure of inflation is what creates inflation now, not the fact that inflation is a consequence of an abnormal volume of money and credit being created by the banking system and the government, which has power to create money out of thin air. And that's how they get away with it. And why am I talking about this today? Well, because I saw an update from The Economist this morning, and it's quite funny, actually. It says, on behalf of business, Turkey's finance minister announced a 10% drop in prices on goods and services to tackle inflation. Berat Albayrak encouraged consumers to prefer companies offering the non-compulsory markdown, which will last to the end of the year. Confidence in the economy has plummeted this year as the lira has lost 38% of its value against the dollar. Well, why has the lira lost all that value against the dollar? Well, because the market doesn't want liras. They printed too many liras, and I've read also in some headlines that people are shocked that inflation is so high in Turkey. I'm not. If you debase the currency like they have, or the market repudiates the currency, your currency is going to be worth less. And that's going to result in rising prices. Will that work? Of course not. I mean, President Nixon tried to impose price controls in the 70s, and all that does is that it makes prices go up even more because producers will not, or you have shortages. Because if you try to force producers to sell their product below the cost of, production and not make a profit, they won't sell it and there will be shortages. So how do they get away with it? Well, the major countries, and especially the US, they manipulate the currency markets to keep their currencies elevated. But not even these countries in the long run can succeed in doing that. I mean, you just have to look at the chart of the British pound. Here's a monthly chart going back 20 years. And you can see that since the crisis of '08, when the pound was, just above 2, we've been going down in the pound. And that's why we have rising cost of living. And why is that happening? Well, because our national debt is more than doubled since then. They've been printing money, the Bank of England, and they've been, goosing up the credit system, the housing market. And that's why the cost of living is going up. That's why the figures they publish, CPI or RPI, are bogus. But they won't be able to keep it going for that long. What's happened in the U.S.? Because the U.S., the debt's gone up, the money supply's gone up, credit has gone through the roof. How come they've been able to? Well, they haven't been able totally because people can feel the rising cost of living. But how have they been able to keep these figures at 2%? Well, first of all, they lie about it. They strip out everything that's going up, like housing and things like that. And like Shadowstat says, they yeah, they use hedonics, they use substitution. And what's substitution? Well, instead of counting fillet steak in the basket, when it rises too much, they'll just count spam or things like that. What's hedonics? Well, they even though car prices go up, for example, compared to 10 years ago, they'll say that the improvements in the car, they eliminate the rise in prices. That's what hedonics is. But eventually they won't be able to do it. They tried it. And also I would say, as a reserve currency, the manipulation of precious metals, which keeps overall commodities subdued, is also another way to keep the public from twigging on to the inflationary tsunami that we're having. But eventually it just, they can't do it. As I said, the markets are much bigger than governments. They tried to do it in the 60s, early 70s with a London gold pool to keep gold and inflation at bay. But look what happened in the 70s. It was a flood of inflation. So, and the other way the Fed's been able to do that is to keep, make banks keep their reserves with the Federal Reserve instead of those reserves, the excess reserves flowing into the real economy. But I think now that they're unwinding their QE, a lot of that money could be start to flow into the economy, and maybe that's why yields are going higher. That's inflation. I won't go longer. I've been done. It's long enough video. So if you enjoyed the video though, please like, share it far and wide. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't yet. You can also follow me on Steemit, DTube, and on Twitter. I wish you a great day. I'll talk to you later. Take care. Bye.